Imagine receiving an invitation to the most exclusive event in history, a royal wedding. Now, the king himself has invited you. You arrive at the palace, the doors swing open, and the banquet hall is filled with people celebrating. But then the music stops, the king walks in, spots a specific guest, and asks a chilling question. Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? Now, before the man can answer, the king orders his servants to tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness. This is not a scene from a movie. This is how Jesus describes the kingdom of heaven in Matthew chapter 22. It's one of the most controversial and misunderstood parables in the entire Bible. It leaves us with a terrifying question. Is it possible to accept God's invitation but still be thrown out in the end? And what is the wedding garment? And do I have one? Well, today we're breaking down Matthew chapter 22. We're going to look at three major confrontations in this chapter: a trap about taxes, a riddle about the resurrection, and this shocking story about a wedding crasher. And by the end of this video, hopefully you'll understand precisely what it means to be chosen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bible Breakdown with me, Ronald. Now, in the last chapter, Jesus flipped the tables in the temple. The religious leaders are furious, and they are coming for him. This chapter is sort of like a boxing match. They throw three different punches, three traps designed to get Jesus arrested, and he counters every single one of them. So grab your Bible, open to Matthew chapter 22, and let's see how the king responds. Jesus starts off right where he left off, talking to the chief priests and Pharisees in the temple courts. So he starts by telling them another parable about a king who prepares a wedding banquet for his son. The king sends his servants to call the guests, and these guests represent the people of Israel, specifically their leaders. They had the law, they had the prophets, they had the history. They were on the guest list. But look at their reaction. Matthew 22, verse 5 and 6 says, "But they paid no attention and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them." Now the king is furious. He destroys those murderers and burns their city, a prophecy that actually came true in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. But the king still has a banquet, and he wants the hall filled, so he issues a new invitation. Matthew 22:9 says, "Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find." This is where we come into the story. Now the servants go into the streets and gather everyone that they can find, the bad as well as the good. And that is grace. In the Bible, grace means God's unmerited favor, love, and kindness freely given to undeserving people. It doesn't matter whether you were good or bad. In society's standards, you got an invite. Now, the hall is filled with guests, but then comes the twist. The king enters, sees the guests, and notices a man there who is not wearing a wedding garment. Now, historically, many scholars believe that for a royal wedding, the king would provide a garment for the guests. He'd give them a special robe to cover their street clothes. So when the man refused to wear a wedding garment, he was basically saying, "I don't need your robe. My own clothes are good enough. I belong here on my own merit." Now, Matthew 22 verses 12 and 13 says, "Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment?" And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendant, "Bind him hand and foot and cast him out into the outer darkness." Now, this sounds harsh, right? But here is the spiritual meaning. The wedding garment is the righteousness of Christ. We cannot enter heaven wearing our own good works or our own morality. The Bible tells us precisely what our own self-righteousness looks like to God. Isaiah 64:6, it says, "All of us have become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous acts are like filthy rags." Did you catch that? Isaiah 64:6 says that our best attempts, our righteous acts, are like filthy rags compared to God's perfection. This guest was trying to stand in the king's presence wearing his own rags instead of the king's grace, and the king had it thrown out into darkness. Now, Jesus ends this section with a chilling warning: "For many are called, but few are chosen." Moving on. Next, in verses 15 through 22, we see the tax trap. So after that parable, the Pharisees retreat. They realize that they can't out-teach Jesus, so they decide to trap him politically. They team up with the Herodians. Now, this is strange because the Pharisees hated the Herodians. The Pharisees were Jewish nationalists, and the Herodians supported King Herod and the Roman government. They were enemies, but they united because they both hated Jesus. Now, they approach him with fake flattery, and they ask him, "Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Now, this is a perfect trap, because if Jesus says yes to paying taxes, the crowd will hate him because they hated Rome. He loses his following. But if Jesus says no, don't pay, then the Herodians will arrest him for treason against Rome. He loses either way. But Jesus sees right through this. He asks them for a coin used to pay the tax. Matthew 22, verses 20 and 21, it says, "And Jesus said to them, 'Whose likeness and inscription is this?' And they said, 'Caesar's.' Then he said to them, 'Therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.'" This answer is genius, right? He admits that Caesar has authority over the money, since it bears his picture after all, but then he pivots. If the coin belongs to Caesar because it bears Caesar's image, then what belongs to God? You do. Genesis tells us that human beings are made in the image of God, Genesis 1:27. So Jesus is saying that you can render your taxes to the government, but you must render your whole self to God. Now, moving on. The following section, verses 23 through 46, teaches us about the resurrection and the greatest commandment. So, strike one, strike two. Now comes the third group, the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the wealthy aristocrats, and unlike the Pharisees, they didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. They thought that when you died, that was it. So they tried to trap Jesus with a ridiculous hypothetical situation about a woman with 7 husbands. They're trying to make the idea of heaven look stupid. Jesus corrects them instantly. He tells them that they're in error because they don't know the scriptures or the power of God. He explains that God is the God of the living, not the dead. Abraham is still alive. Finally, one expert in the law sees that Jesus has silenced everyone in the crowd. So he asks the question in verse 36, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Now, there were 613 Jewish laws. They loved to debate which one was the most important. But Jesus doesn't hesitate. He gives us the summary of the entire Bible in 2 sentences. Matthew 22, verse 37 and 39 says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Notice he doesn't say, obey the rules or make sacrifices. No, he says love. If you love God completely, you won't worship idols or take his name in vain. And if you love your neighbor, you won't steal for him or lie to him. Love is the fulfillment of the law. And so, just to finish the debate, Jesus asks them a question about the Messiah. He asks them, "What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he?" And they correctly answered, "The son of David." Jesus then follows up by quoting Psalm 110, verse 1, asking, "How then does David in the Spirit call him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool'?" This question of the Messiah's dual nature, being both the promised descendant of David, human lineage, and David's Lord, divine pre-existence, completely exposed their limited, purely human understanding of the Christ. The top religious leaders were really hoping for a political hero, a Messiah who came from David's line, but they had a tough time matching that idea with the parts of the Bible that also said that the Messiah would be divine. Jesus' question was so spot on and straightforward that it totally caught them off guard. They could not provide a satisfactory answer that harmonized with the scriptures regarding the Messiah's role. The gospel account confirms the finality of this moment in verse 46, which states, "And no one was able to answer him a word, nor from that day did anyone dare to ask him any more questions." Now, the confrontation was unequivocally over. Jesus had not merely survived their interrogation, he had demonstrated a profound, divinely inspired mastery of the scriptures that was far beyond the grasp of his critics. He effectively silenced the opposition, proving himself not only to be a wise teacher, but also the faithful interpreter and living fulfillment of the law and the prophets. Jesus won. Matthew 22 is a chapter of confrontations. Now, the leaders try to trap Jesus with politics, theology, and legalism. But every time, Jesus brought it back to the heart. He showed us that it's not enough to just show up to the banquet like the man without the garment. And it's not enough to worry about politics like the coin. It's not enough to know the technicalities of the law, as the Sadducees do. What really matters is, number one, are you wearing the righteousness of Christ? Number two, are you giving God what belongs to him, your life? And number 3, do you love him with all your heart? Now, the religious leaders were invited, but they refused to come on God's terms. They wanted a political Messiah, not a savior who demanded their heart. Don't make that mistake. The invitation is open to you today. The banquet is ready. The robe is paid for. You just have to put it on. And there you have it. Next time in chapter 23, Jesus stops debating the leaders and starts pronouncing woes upon them. It's one of the harshest and boldest speeches that Jesus ever gives. He calls them whitewashed tombs. You don't want to miss it. But before we go, I want to ask you a question about that wedding garment. I know this can be a confusing concept, especially if you're new to the Bible. So think of it this way. The guest who was thrown out basically was saying, I don't need the king's robe. My own clothes are good enough. Now, in our lives, that looks like trying to be perfect all the time, or thinking that we can earn our way to heaven just by being a good person. Putting on the wedding garment simply means admitting that we're not perfect. I can't do this on my own. I need God's help. So my question for you today is this. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you finally stopped trying to be good enough on your own and just asked God to take over? Now, you may be trying to figure that out, and that is totally okay. I'd love to hear where you are on your journey in the comments below. Whether you've been a follower for decades or you're just starting to ask questions, your story helps us all feel a little less alone. Now, if this video helped clarify things for you, please hit the like button. It really helps to reach more people. And also make sure you're subscribed, because in chapter 23, Jesus stops answering the questions and speaks directly to the multitudes and his disciples with a severe warning. As I've already said, you don't want to miss it. I'm Ronald. Thank you so much for watching. God bless. I'll see you in the following breakdown, and have a great day.